Earlier we saw that we can pass a number into the display method. Let's talk more about the different inputs and output of a method. Let's look at the submit order method in the main activity as an example. Say you have a bunch of lines of code in that method. When the user clicks on the order button, it will trigger the submit order method to be called. The Android device will execute each of these instructions from top to bottom, and when it hits the calculate price method call, it will jump over to where the calculate price method is defined. Say that this is defined at the bottom of the main activity file. The Android device will execute each of these instructions from top to bottom of the method, and then it will jump back to the submit order method. Then it will continue executing these instructions until it hits the end of the method. When the calculate price method is called, we can pass a bunch of inputs over so that when we're executing these lines of code, we can use these input values. As a result of this method, we can pass a single output value back to the caller. That way, the output value can be used in the subsequent lines of code. In Java, we call the inputs to a method input parameters, and we can have 0 or more input parameters. In Java, we call the output a return value, and we can have 0 or 1 return value. An example of an input parameter is passing the quantity over to the calculate price method. That way, this method can use the quantity to figure out the total price of the whole order. And then we can pass that total price back as a return value. And then in the submit order method down here, we can use this total price to do other things like display it on screen or create a receipt or anything like that. So to summarize, this is where we define the calculate price method, and this is where we call it. We want to create a method to calculate the price of a coffee order. Currently, we calculate the price directly in the submit order method, but the logic to calculate the price is going to get a little more complicated, so let's move it into its own method. Then we can call it as many times as we want without copying and pasting the code everywhere. As you gain more experience in Android development, you'll gain better judgment on when to create a new method for something or when you don't need to. This will just come with more experience and more time. So this is the first time we're going to be creating a new method in the main activity on our own. Instead of starting by writing it from scratch, we want to start by learning to recognize what is a correct method by reading some code snippets. So in the instructor notes, we're going to provide you 3 options. Read over these 3 code snippets and determine which option correctly implements the method to calculate the price of the order. When you click on the link in the instructor notes, you'll see this gist. It has code for options A, B, and C. The goal here is for you to become comfortable with reading code that you've never seen before. We haven't gone over the exact rules for what makes a valid method, but I want you to make your best guess on which option you think is most correct. I also encourage you to Google search for more information on how to define Java methods. As you click through the different search results, you'll come across information in the documentation that you don't understand, but I want you to become comfortable with not understanding everything on those pages, because it's perfectly normal to not understand everything. All you need to do is just skim the articles for what you understand and what you think is relevant to the problem at hand. So go ahead and read the code for these 3 options, look up some information online, and then make your best guess on how to correctly define the calculate price method.